Started an open source project, CiviCRM, from 2005 to 2015. And it's been like 7 years and it's still growing, alive and strong and kicking and community maintained and supported. When you start an organization, you never want to be the only funder on it, because the minute you're the only funder on it, when you will lose interest at some point in time. That means luckily for us, Glific came in at the right point in time with the right set of people. WhatsApp had just opened up its APIs, and made it accessible to everyone in a relatively easy manner. The people side, we only hire for, like, more to a large extent, we want people full time, right? So we rarely take people in half time, unless you're telling us that we'll come in half time, but in 3 months we'll switch to full time. That you probably get this question a lot, like, can I trust these NGOs? Right? And
good thing you're
like,
touching upon it.
In my 20 plus years in the sector, I haven't come across a single NGO where I even thought about that question. In general, it's always been the other way around.
Hi there. Welcome back to part 2 of the discussion with Donald Lobo. In the first episode, we spoke with him about his personal journey as a philanthropist. And in this episode, we cover his role as an ecosystem leader in the Indian nonprofit sector, especially the various technology platform initiatives. So we'll dive straight into it. Here goes. So tell us about the Tech for Dev initiative. How did it start? What was the goal? What is the goal? How is it shaping up, and where do you see it going? Lots of questions there.
Yeah, so again, we'll go back in history, right? So I'll kind of just rewind time back to 20 years ago, right? When I was figuring out what can I do to contribute back to the social sector.
Correct.
Right? It means where do I see playing a role by myself in the sector? And I realize, like, giving money is like, means that we are going to do that, but it's not fulfilling enough, right? It's means I'm not very sure what I do with the rest of my time, right? Because like it only takes you like 10 minutes to sign 10 checks, right? And these days it's just wire, so you don't even have to sign anything. And then after some thought, some reflection, a lot of days skiing on the mountain, because I was a ski bum for 6 months while I was figuring this out. I realized that I really love tech. Means I loved my job at Yahoo, right? I still consider those 7 years as like really. It means it's as much fun as I'm having today. And I realized, like, I want to continue working on my tech skills and kind of, because that's the place where I can make the biggest impact. So when I switched to the social sector, it was always with a combination of open source technology, social impact, etc. Started an open source project, CiviCRM, from 2005 to 2015. And then when that was grown up and a teenage kid, decided that since it's an open source community maintained project, like, let's see if the community is really going to maintain it. And it's been like 7 years and it's still growing, alive and strong and kicking and community maintained and supported. And weirdly enough, like, again, I keep coming back in circles, right? This morning I was on another call with a really large NGO where we are going to deploy CiviCRM.
Oh, beautiful.
Right. Means we are going to probably make a lot of customizations, contributions, and contributed it back to the community, etc. Right. But when we started CiviCRM in 2007, 5 or 7, that means it wasn't for the global south, right? It was mainly for the global north. But again, like, I think India and many of the global south countries are advancing at a really fast rate that we can do all these things.
They're at that stage now, they can use all of this. Yes, absolutely.
And so after I migrated from CiviCRM, spent another few months trying to figure out next steps. So I started working with the groups that we are funding in a fairly big way in India, and started talking to them and realized that many of them were struggling with very basic things from a tech perspective, right? They were spending a lot of human capital on something that could have been easily automated. And for all of us who've been involved with tech, who've been involved with the social sector, right? The one thing which I'm always blown away with is, like, how committed and how smart these founders are, right?
They are.
It's not like It's like these are an amazing group of social entrepreneurs,
Absolutely.
right? Who
Yeah.
are smarter than most people in the valley, right?
Smarter, more passionate, more resilient, and always, figuring a way out around problems or challenges. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So all of and they were just having these barriers which shouldn't be barriers at all. And our theory
Hmm,
was, if
hmm,
we
hmm,
kind of just try to minimize these barriers, lower these barriers, can we make them even more effective? Right? Can we
hmm,
kind of strengthen them even stronger? And that
hmm,
was the genesis of Tech for Dev. Right. So we basically said, like, let's run a bunch of pilot programs with like 5 to 10 NGOs. It will cost us like 100 $200,000, like assuming 20k USD per NGO, and we connected them with software companies who were part of our network that we had known being out there, like organizations like Dhwani RIS from Swapnil and Sunandan, or Think 201 with Yash, or Colored Cow with Pratik, etc. Right? And we said, like, hey, go work with these NGOs,
hmm.
solve the problem, tell us what problem you're solving, and try to use as much open source as possible,
Got it.
right?
Got
And
it.
let's see how that goes. And that went really well, right?
Hmm, hmm, hmm,
And then luckily for me, one of my good friends is also Amit Chandra's really good friend,
hmm, hmm,
right?
hmm.
And he's been talking to me about Amit quite some time, and Amit is this really big person in the Indian philanthropic
Indian
world.
philanthropy word.
And then finally I said, okay, let me go talk to Amit, and I went
Hmm.
and talked to Amit, right? And Amit had kind of kept track of our work or something like that. And then as we were talking, he said, like, why are you just restricting this to your network? Why don't you think bigger and kind of keep it, just open it up to a larger ecosystem? And that was a triggering point, and I have to give credit to Amit for that, right? And then we said, and at that point in time, we said, okay, let's raise like 500,000 to help even more NGOs. And at that point in time, these numbers were kind of like semi big to us, right? Because we
Yeah.
weren't we
Yeah.
weren't used to going and asking other people for money.
Got it.
And I knew, like, based on my CiviCRM experience, when you start an organization, you never want to be the only funder on it, because
True.
the minute you're the only funder on it, you will lose interest at some point in time,
And
whether
then it
it's
becomes a high risk for the work that's being done. Yes.
yeah, I mean, then it's pretty much guaranteed that that work is going to die, right? Because if you are the sole
Exactly.
funder and if you stop funding it, all right.
Exactly.
So we always pull in other funders, and that's where the Yahoo network and the Silicon Valley HNI network was really super helpful, right? Who always kind of gave even more than I gave, right? So typically, so in Tech for Dev 1.0, we set up with a goal of to raise 500K, um, and and I wanted to raise at least 300K from the community, from our network. And I sent out mail to all my friends. And Philo, who's the founder of Yahoo, his wife Angela, who I know fairly well, right? So they were one of the first folks that I sent mail to. And she responds like in less than a day, maybe in 15 minutes, saying like, why are you thinking so small? Why don't you think even bigger? And I'll give you
Mm, mm.
500K, or we'll
Right
give you
away.
a significant chunk, uh, shoot even bigger.
Mm.
Um, or it was no, it was no, actually no, it wasn't 500K. It was 1 million or so. Yeah, it was 1 million. Yeah, it was 500K for a year, so it was 1.5 million.
For 3 years.
So then
Okay.
the minute she said, like, we are willing to give you like 500K or a million or something, I mean, she made this incredibly ridiculous offer, right? It's like, okay, like, so that 1 million became 3 million, right? So we
Mm,
basically said, let's raise 3 million.
mm,
And our theory of fundraising, or at least my theory of fundraising, and I do acknowledge, and um, uh, I'm a bit ashamed of this. Not ashamed, but it's like, it's the power of networks, right?
mhm,
Unfortunately,
mhm.
even in the NGO world,
It is.
like, it's not that because I'm doing amazing work, it's because I know a lot of people, like a lot of people who made money and who are willing to trust me and give me money. And to some
Yeah.
extent, that's kind of not the best way, right? Or of
But it is a
it's
way
not
that
it,
works and it's effective, right?
yeah, but it's an unfair way, right?
Mm, mm,
To a
mm.
large extent, which is, I mean, but I have no idea. Means I can't solve. Means I don't know how to solve
Yeah.
that problem. I'm not
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
solve the problem. I'm grateful to my network for giving me the
Exactly.
money,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
please continue if you're listening. Please
Please.
continue giving me more money, 10x more than what you've given me in the past.
Yeah.
Um, so I like to raise money for 3 years in the first 3 months. And pretty for Tech for Dev 1.0, in the first month we raise like 18-90%, and once you reach 80%, 90%, you know the rest 20% is going to follow through. So that was in Tech for Dev 1.0. We raised 3 million. We started working on it in year in the middle of the we worked with quite a few NGOs in year 1.5 COVID hit, and Indian NGOs switched to doing migrant relief, food
Yeah.
alleviation, etc., which was definitely
Correct.
the work. Means technology was the last thing on in their
On their
mind. Like
mind.
you really
Yeah.
don't need too much technology to distribute ration, because
Correct.
a lot of it was very local efforts, right? Because
Correct.
shipping was really hard, etc., etc.
Correct. Correct.
So we did a bunch of experiments during COVID, but that was a really nice time for us to switch to the platform mode, because even in Tech for Dev 1.0, we knew that like you can't build custom solutions
Mm-hmm.
for the industry. Like the US world, the US world has switched to using platforms a long time
Correct.
ago, right?
Correct.
Pre-COVID in Indian NGOs, like using platforms was non-existent. Like everyone wanted a custom solution
Custom
built for
solution.
their specific needs, and
Correct.
and even the foundations and funders, right? The other lesson that we learned very early on was, NGOs will do what the funders tell them to do.
Hmm.
Like they
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
don't have too much, unfortunately. Like these are some
Hmm.
bad effects. They don't
Hmm.
have too much say. So if you want to
Hmm.
change the ecosystem, talk to the people who control the money strings.
Correct.
And so then we started just approaching foundations and started talking to them about like what we should be like, how they should be thinking about funding tech, etc. But when COVID hit, and so our pitch to everyone, our funders in Tech for the 1.0 was, at the end of 3 years, we know enough that we'll build quite a few platforms to serve multiple NGOs. And we said we are going to take 2 to 3 years to figure it out,
Got it.
right? But in year 1.5, since COVID hit, we had a lot of tech bench strength,
Ben.
not only
Yeah.
across mainly across our software partners, right? Because
Sure.
none of them had work to do, but
Hmm.
they had staff to pay, and they didn't
Hmm.
want to.
Hmm.
So we came up with two platforms, Fund Impact and Glific, right?
Got it. Got
Which
it.
were seeds in our head for a long time, and it was the right set. I mean, luckily for us, Glific came in at the right point in time with the right set of people. WhatsApp had just opened up its APIs.
Right.
Um, and made it accessible to everyone in a relatively easy manner. No
Correct.
one in India could go to school or seek
Mm-hmm.
help, etc. So everyone was talking on WhatsApp. So again, luck favors has been favoring me for a long time, and I would say the same was true for the start of Glyphic, right?
Hmm.
Right
Hmm.
product at the right time with the right group of people. We
Hmm.
again built it as a collaborative. We had enough money from Tech for Dev 1.0, helped a bunch of nonprofits reach their communities using WhatsApp two-way communication. Today we have 100 plus NGOs on Glyphic, right? And as we were doing Glyphic, we realized that there were some NGOs who were using Glyphic really, really well and getting paisa vasool, their money back. Like they were basically like they're taking way more from us for the money they were paying. But there were
Hmm.
quite a few NGOs who were basically donating to us. All right, they were giving us money, but not really using the service.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then when we started figuring out like why is that, like, and again, like with anything in life, it's the classic bell curve.
Mm-hmm.
And when we try to figure out what's happening and why it was happening, right,
Hmm.
we realized that many of the NGOs who weren't using it as much, didn't have dedicated resources, like were kind of like trying to do too many things with too little. It's the classic NGO story, right? You
Hmm.
have 10
Hmm.
different
Hmm.
funders
Hmm.
wanting you to do 10 different things with 5 people.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
then everyone is distracted and trying to meet the latest deadline from the most recent deadline from the funder, right?
Got
And
it.
trying to stagger your deadline. And we realized that NGOs could use a tech strategy, could use help with tech strategy, tech roadmaps, and a slightly larger thinking of tech.
Hmm.
And we had a really a good pilot test in Sneha, Mumbai, right,
Got
run
it.
by Dr. Fernandez and Vanessa and some other amazing women. Um, and we started this fractional CXO program
Got
where
it.
we at the same time we also got this amazing volunteer who was living in Colorado at that point in time, Vinod, who was looking to move back to India. So it was like, again, all the stars aligned at the same point in time. Vinod would tell us he's spending 10 hours a week in with Sneha in Mumbai remotely, and Erica, who's our CEO, and I would kind of look at each other and say, like, either this person is a superhuman or he's spending 20 hours and just telling us he's spending 10
Yes.
hours. And it's probably a mixture of the two, right?
Got it. So,
uh,
so Lobo, so there's Glyphic, which is, so all of this is open source. Glyphic
yeah,
is leveraging WhatsApp
yeah,
for creating communications and community sort of engagement on that platform. Then there is there other open source software as well as part of this initiative?
Yeah, and again, mean most of the times when we build platforms, right, we'll
Yeah,
always build platforms when we see a product need,
sure.
right? We'll
Right.
rarely build platforms because we think
Just
it's
because we
something
think
cool
it.
to do,
Correct.
right? Or
Correct.
because we
Correct.
sometimes, so we'll always try to find 5 to 7 NGOs who are
Yeah.
fairly convinced or who are willing to put in a bit of money to
Yeah.
help us build a platform, even though that money is 10% of what it actually costs us. And the
Sure.
only reason why we ask them to put in money is primarily because it gives skin in the game for them, right?
Makes sense.
Otherwise, most NGOs will always tell a funder that whatever you say, I'm going to do, right? I mean, because for them, in the yes game means if you ask an NGO, do you think this is a good idea?
They'll
They'll
end up
always
saying
say, yes,
yes.
this is the
Hmm.
greatest ideas I've ever
Yeah.
heard of. If you give it
Yeah.
to me, I'm going to use it yesterday.
Correct. Correct.
And primarily because that's the way, and I don't blame them at all for that, right? Because that's the way the whole ecosystem has been working. Though as big as NGOs get bigger,
Yeah.
and people like Safina Hussain or
Hmm.
Anshu from Gunj, right, are really
Right.
setting the trend and setting the path where people are being comfortable in their own skin to tell funders no, right? To
Yeah.
saying like,
Yeah.
you want us to do it, but it does not make sense for us to do it, and we are not going to do it. You
Correct.
can go find
Correct.
someone else. And I do
Correct.
hope that more and more NGOs, like I don't expect the small NGOs to do it, primarily because for them survival is more important. But NGOs like us, NGOs like Educate Girls, Gunj, etc., like once we are comfortable in our own skin, if
Yeah.
we don't push back, we are going to get screwed, right?
Totally.
And I
Totally.
think the balance game is really important.
Right.
So we've got Glific, which is a WhatsApp communication platform. We've got Dalgo, which is a data platform,
I
which
see.
again came in like with our experiences working with Sneha and seeing how they manage their pipeline with organizations like Sneha, Stir, Nura Health, and that actually Dalgo also came out with a collaboration with an amazing organization in the US called the Agency Fund,
Mm-hmm.
which is like a funder duo,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Totally.
And luckily for us, again, right place, right time. They
Yeah.
just hired a tech person who saw our application as one of his first things, because if he wasn't hired, our application would have gone in the bin, because
Yeah.
it was a very tech centric application, right?
Got it.
And they
Got
didn't
it.
have tech centric people. So our partnership with the Agency Fund today is probably one of the strongest collaborations we are involved
Lovely.
with, right? We do
Lovely.
everything, we do so many things together. um, and they helped us conceptualize the data platform
Got it.
called Dalgo. We partnered with another organization in Bangalore called Sammanvay Research, run by this bunch of ex-ThoughtWorks people,
Ah.
right, who built this mobile data collection toolkit
Got it. Got it.
for
Got it.
case management for hospitals. And right now it's been run for a really large scale Niti Aayog project for rejuvenating water bodies with the ATCF Foundation. And we aren't necessarily, for us, these are these we build these products because we saw holes in the marketplace, right?
Got it. Got
And
it.
there are lots of other amazing open source tools, like there's Primero for child abuse violations,
Hmm.
or child or domestic violence, etc. There's ODK and
So,
Kobo
so what
Toolbox.
is the process, Lobo, that anyone, let's say, they need technical or technology guidance, technology strategy, and or a platform? What is the way that they would engage with the Tech for Dev initiative? And so, like, is there a way that they would say, well, these are the different platforms available, these are the ones that work for me, and so I'll contact someone at the organization to help me, or I have a need which does not fall in any of these and I want to have a conversation? How would that process work for anyone looking to leverage technology?
So we've got we've got websites for everything that we do, and including a master website, and we tell people to just send us email and everything, and we
Got
are
it.
more than happy to talk to a couple, or to do the first hour or two pro bono, right?
Got it.
And
Got
just
it.
give people advice. And I probably spend do at least 5 calls a week on that.
Got it.
And our team also does that. But we always encourage NGOs is, don't talk to me about technology.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about what problem you're
The
trying to
problem.
solve, right?
True. True.
And ignore technology. Like you might be
Exactly.
really good at technology. Like once we understand the problem, then you can tell us what you're thinking of it from a technology perspective, right?
Of course.
But talk to us about your problem. Tell us what your problem is. Tell us why it's important, and
Hmm.
tell us how it affects your day to day life, right?
Right. Right.
And then based on that, once we get a pretty good sense of that,
Hmm.
then we'll figure out like where it makes sense, right?
Got it.
So
Got
we'll
it.
never ever go sell Glyphic to someone.
Got it.
right?
So then again, let me make sure I understood this right. So under the initiative, there are two sort of streams, but they're tightly integrated together, interrelated together, because that's how technology adoption goes. Is one is the platform piece, which is again also driven by the problem definition or problem articulation by one or multiple groups uh, of NGOs that come together and articulate the problem, and then with the skin in the game, they either use an existing platform or a new platform is created because there's a new problem need identified. The other is the fractional CXO initiative, which then is really, once the platform has been built, that's only half or even less than half the battle won. The other part is really adopting, leveraging it, using it better, making the process around it, or really becoming an organization that is savvy enough. So how does the fractional, so first of all, does that summarize sort of the
Yeah,
two rails of
yeah, agree.
how you
Yeah,
want to
that
use?
summarizes the rails, and there's a third rail that we'll come get to pretty soon. But the one slight modification that I would make with your description is the fractional CXO is not necessarily a salesperson for our platforms, right? For them, they are going to
Makes sense.
look at an NGO more holistically and seeing like,
Yeah.
tell me, talk to us about all your problems, your
Right.
priorities, and then we'll figure out what solutions. And we don't. Our goal isn't to increase Glific sales with all our
Yeah.
fractional CX. If
And I
it
think that
makes
makes
sense,
sense. Yeah.
yeah,
And I think that makes
right,
sense. It is independent. Maybe I should have characterized it. It is
yeah,
independent of you using the platform or not. That is an independent rail. And if it so happens that the platform, there is a platform that is suitable within or without the outside of the suite of things that are part of the initiative, that is what the
yeah.
fractional CXO will help. Now, when you say the fractional CXO, is this just the CTO kind of a role, or is it CMO, COO, CFO, all different kinds of fractional
So I would say it's more
roles?
kind of in the tech orbit. So initially we called
Got
it
it.
a fractional CTO, and then we
Got it.
realized like technology is just one small part. There's data is also a really big
Hmm.
part. So there's also the
Hmm.
data aspect of things, and people cannot
Hmm.
have
Hmm.
organizations cannot have a CTO and a CDO. And then to a
Hmm.
lot for a large number of organizations, tech strategy, tech roadmap, just kind of
Hmm.
laying down the path of how and where they should go with tech is also really important, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
that's why we kind of changed that from the CTO, because CTO was too binding. We changed
Hmm.
it to a CXO, right? But so far, and I do think at least for the next couple of years, means I don't think we'll ever get into things like CFO or COO,
Hmm.
etc.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Though I know that the X does cause a confusion, but that was
Yeah.
just a shorthand for all things that are kind of remotely or semi-connected to tech.
Got it.
Um,
Got it. Got it.
but to a large extent, but we also believe that tech is not does is just an enabler, right? We don't think
Yeah.
tech is the solution. So many a times we'll tell people, you shouldn't be using Glyphic, right? It does
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
make sense
Hmm. Hmm.
for you
Hmm.
to use it, or this platform is overkill for you. And many a times we'll so coming back to how should NGOs adopt technology, right? The one thing that we do is we charge for everything that we do. We don't do anything pro bono, period, right?
Fair enough.
Um, so for small NGOs, what we tell them, like, Google like the whole G Suite suite of applications, you can do really amazing stuff. There's
Stuff with
lots
that.
of really cheap and
Totally.
free and simple tools out there that you can run your business on quite nicely. And if that meets your needs, go for it. You don't need an app for everything, right? And we are more than happy to fight with funders or to discuss with funders for those things. So for the smaller NGOs, for us, the main thing is, can we give you a solution that meets your needs for as cheap a cost as possible? Right,
Correct.
but at
Correct.
relatively high quality. The one thing which we are really trying to fight against, and which is my pet peeve these days, is um, I actually like NGOs' expectations for quality or delivery from software partners is so low, right? I want them, I
Interesting.
mean, they should realize
Interesting.
that they are clients, they are paying people money for it.
Interesting.
They should expect a much higher standard of service. And for us who
Hmm.
are vendors or all our software partners, we have to deliver high enough quality stuff. We can't give, means just because we are in the social sector does not mean we can afford to give people crap, right?
That is so interesting. I would have assumed. Oh, okay. That is
Right,
something that to learn.
right.
Okay.
And means the stories that we've heard are just mind blowing, right? Sometimes I think,
Hmm.
what universe do we live in? I've heard
Hmm.
NGO leaders say, like, we get anxiety attacks when we are going to talk to our software partner.
Hmm.
And it's like, you've got to be kidding me.
So
Means,
that
no.
dynamic is so screwed up, for lack of a better word, that it is again that you're doing me a favor by doing whatever you can throw my way. I'll try to do the best I can because I'm at the bottom of the food chain, so to call it, and everyone else just throws whatever they don't need to me, and then I'll have to make the salvage the best out of it. And that's
Yeah.
sort of the dynamic with everyone.
Oh yeah,
Interesting.
but if you're paying money, it does not make any
Yeah,
difference, right? I mean, I would tell
yeah,
software partners. Means there is means I'm not blaming
of
NGOs
course.
only. There's
Yeah,
this whole dynamic, right? And
yeah, yeah,
unfortunately, again, I was talking with the Goonj folks earlier today. The one thing which I have absolutely no idea how to solve, and I don't think we'll ever have a solution, is tech people. Tech is expensive. Tech people are ridiculously expensive,
right, right.
right? Yeah, NGOs from a salary structure, from a budget structure, will have to kind of go outside their salary structure. They'll have to invest way more in tech than what they've invested in anything and everything else, right?
Yeah. By the
But
way, you mentioned Goonj. I just wanted to say that I noticed, or I was exposed to the Salesforce implementation they have of the whole logistics management and moving goods. I have to say, across industries or sectors, this is probably one of the better, if not among the best, Salesforce implementations and usage I've seen at Goonj. Incredibly efficient, well trained, and the right way of using Salesforce. So if you set your goals high, if you do it the right way, there is definitely way to leverage technology in the best way possible across for profit or non-profit. And Goonj was a great example of that. I don't know if you were involved or your organization was involved with that, but I have to say it was really, really gratifying to see that.
yeah, and that's a really amazing example, right?
Mhm.
Like, you mean build technology when you need it, and
Yeah.
when you realize that you have to, like, exactly what your purpose is, then you kind of focus on it. And like, if you talk to Anshu or Minakshi, right, or Shivangi, who's kind of been the driver of it, and the CTO there, it's been a labor of love, a labor of hard work, and it's been a ridiculous amount of money, right? Means Anshu will
Oh, I
always,
see.
sorry,
Yeah.
Anshu, means please forgive me, but Anshu will always complain about how expensive it is, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm not going to dispute him, or Minakshi will say
Mm,
the same thing,
mm,
but I'm not
mm.
going to dispute them on it, right? But I don't now know have any ideas on how to solve that problem, right?
True,
Means I
true,
can't
true.
make Salesforce licenses any cheap. I can't make
Yeah.
Salesforce developers any
Development
cheap.
any cheaper. Correct,
All
correct,
right.
correct. Yeah.
And there's that trade-off. Is it fair? I don't think so. Is it
Mm,
just? No. Right?
mm,
Can we
mm,
fix it? No.
mm,
All
mm.
right.
Totally, totally.
But there's trade-offs in life, right? And this is one trade-off that I'm willing to make, and that's what we fight with funders for, right? We'll
Got it.
always tell them, like, we are going to pay our people really, really well,
Yeah.
because because I want them to stay with us forever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's the only way. Means obviously I'm not going to compete with the Googles and the Microsofts, right?
Hmm.
Means I
Hmm.
can't compete. Means if I could compete with them, if I get funding to compete with them, I would love to do that,
Got it.
right?
Got it.
But right now I'm getting enough funding to compete with them at a mid level. We'll pay significantly better than many Indian companies, and we should continue to do that, right? Yeah, it's a
So,
bit
so
unfair, etc. Yeah.
yeah, no. So Lobo, then switching, maybe touching upon this last thing, maybe a little bit more detail, is the fractional CO, so CXO initiative. So, what kind of engagement are you seeing from people who want to offer their skills and experience and services as a fractional CXO on one side, and on the flip side, with organizations looking to get the benefit of a fractional CXO? What has the journey been? What has the experience been? And what does it look like shaping into?
Yeah. So just as a clarification, right? So the fractional part is more from an NGO perspective. So an NGO uses on, like, and the only reason, and as NGOs get bigger, like, say example Gunj or Sneha, right? We know that they have to hire full time people. So
Correct.
this is
Okay.
just maybe just as a stopgap measure as we are kind of figuring out what type of person it is, right?
Got it.
But so that's from a demand side of things. Like, we typically place half a person with an NGO, primarily so that it's a bit more reasonable, a bit more affordable to them. And we typically charge the NGO two-thirds to three-quarters of what it costs us. Especially with regard to salary plus a bit of overhead, and the other 25 to 33% we get from grant money.
Got
And
it.
hopefully that number will keep raising, will keep going up, because at some point in time I know all my funders are going to tell me they love me, but they aren't going to give me any more money.
Got it.
And that day is
Got it.
coming sooner rather than later, right?
Got it.
um,
But in terms of
from the
the
demand side, right?
yeah.
From the people side, we only hire for, like, more to a large extent we want people full time, right?
I
So
see.
we
I see.
rarely take people in half time unless you're telling us that we'll come in half time, but in
Yeah.
3 months we'll switch to full time.
Got it. So it's
Right.
full time.
So
And again, what has the response been? Have people come in inbound, or have you had to look for people and then hire them? What has sort of the experience been there?
so we've been getting way more. So these days, pretty much on a weekly basis, I'll get in one amazing resume.
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
For
Hmm.
us, the most important, because we are going to pay significantly less than your corporate job,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? The one important criteria for us is uh, how um, how invested are you in the social sector? Like, are you really committed to the social sector?
Got it. Got it.
Right. Because if people are uh, doing the trade-off between a social sector job and a corporate job, we can never win with the corporate. The minute you're putting those two things on the same thing, it's a losing game for us,
It's a
right?
dead on
Uh,
arrival.
like
Yeah.
irrespective
Totally.
of people's best intentions, etc. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so these means what we are and we are learning all these things
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
quickly, right? I
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
learned this like not to even get into a discussion with people who are still contemplating the two. And
Hmm.
now what we are thinking of people who, at least I'm thinking, right? The team might be surprised if they hear this podcast. Hopefully they don't. Is like, especially for people who are switching from the corporate sector who haven't volunteered with the social sector, maybe we should get them to volunteer for 1 to 2 months and
Hmm.
get them to see what life in the social sector is and whether they really want to do it. Many people think it's a second career, right?
Hmm.
So I would
Hmm.
like to dispel that myth, right? It's not a second career, it's probably your zeroth career, your first. It's as stressful, or
Hmm.
the amount of work is as much, if not even more, than your corporate
Your
career.
personal
Like,
investment does not change. If anything, it becomes even more.
yeah,
Yeah.
it becomes even more, you get even
Hmm.
more tied. Means I'm
Correct.
working today as hard as I was working in the first few years at Yahoo, right? It's
Totally.
like
Totally.
probably even more. Like,
Hmm.
my kids
Hmm.
have explicitly told me, like, we don't want to work in the social sector because we don't want to work as hard as you.
As hard as you. Got it.
Right,
Got it.
like you work too much, right?
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
but again, like, and this is what we tell the team all the time, right? Like, don't follow the number of hours we work, like I
Hmm.
work, right,
Hmm.
or some of us
Hmm.
work, because we work because we're having fun at it, right?
Exactly.
Means if
Because
you
it's
want to
interesting.
like, if for you maintaining, and I think I've got an amazing balance of work and life, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
so I am really happy with my balance, but you do
Hmm.
what you're doing, what you're
Hmm.
supposed to do, but you should also know what your expectations are with what we expect you to deliver, etc. We don't
Got it.
expect you to go above and beyond like some of us. And there's this whole we're having this argument, not argument, these discussions within Tech for Dev quite a bit. These like, are we setting a good example or a bad example?
Hmm.
Means we
Hmm.
definitely
Hmm.
don't want to set a good example in the sense that we don't want people to follow us, right?
Got it.
And I'm, unfortunately, I'm too old to change, and I'm having too much fun to change, right? So
Okay. So
yeah.
then I guess last thing, Lobo, I just want to get your perspective on uh, what does the future look like, and this is sort of crystal ball gazing, but I want to have you comment on it because you're sort of in the middle of it, with of course AI and robotics on one side. They have a lot of potential for so much that they can do, but there's also on the flip side dangers that you feel that there could be so much displacement of jobs. And then there's the climate change, which is also again another potential, high potential for displacement of not just people but communities and areas where, with these really significant changes coming about and we are on the cusp of it. Where do you see this whole progression going, especially with technology playing a role in that in the next few years?
I was having this
Optim.
conversation with someone recently, right? And the future is super scary,
Hmm.
right? In the
Yeah.
sense that where, like, what we are leaving to the next generation, like, we are being incredibly awful stewards, right? Like, I'm sad for our children, that what we are leaving them is a shitload of problems, like, not only means across everything, right?
Hmm.
From society at the politics and government and democracy level, from the climate level, from the rich poor divide level. Like, there's very few area from the environment level, there's very few areas where we can be proud of what the legacy we are leaving our children, right? So that's looking at it from a very pessimistic view, right? And if we look at it from a very pessimistic view, it's like the sky is falling, the sky is falling, we are screwed, and we'll basically just hunker down and just enjoy life as much as we can, and hope we kick the bucket sooner rather than later. But on the other hand, but that's a very pessimistic, that's a very dismal view, right? We also have got to be looking at it from an optimistic view. And we've got to fight. We've always got to fight the good fight. We've got to band with others fighting the good fight. There are good things about AI. There are bad things about AI. There are things we control and things that we don't control. Right? I mean, should we get suckered into all the amazing things that everyone tells us that AI is going to do? No, right? But should we stay on the sidelines and say like, yeah, this may or may not pan out, let's not do anything with it? No, right? So there's no right or wrong answer, right? So we've always got to experiment and see like, hey, can we use this for our benefit? Can we use this to make something worthwhile, something good out of it, right? How can we use it to optimize our things? What can we do for upskilling, right? What do we do? Like, so all of us across all this, and this happens even in business, right? So I don't think business is very different than NGOs, right? Because the TCSs and the Wipros have to realize that a lot of their incoming staff might be obsoleted, right? Which is very similar to NGOs, right? Can we start figuring out like how can we build and capitalize on technology to have a better path for the future? And to us, running experiments is the way to go, right? If you just keep doing what you're doing the entire time, you're going to get screwed, right? So if we don't experiment, if we don't play around with things, it's going to be it's going to be it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be like at some point in time you're just going to be steamrolled over.
Absolutely.
So we do want NGOs, and that's where we push in, right? So that's where our ecosystem level work. Like, can we keep pushing the barriers? Can we keep pushing the edge of the envelope? Can we set you all up to do a lot of experiments? Like, it's okay to, means I know this is quite common cliche, etc., that it's good to fail, etc., but we have to kind of fund. And again, this comes back to the funders. This comes back to giving NGOs enough money. This comes back to giving them enough of a budget to try these experiments, which may or may not succeed, right? Like at Tech for Dev, we are super lucky that we've got a really good budget that we run all these experiments, we have these standards, and we are okay for things to fail, right? So many a times we have these pilots where it's like, jo hota hai hone do. But I don't think many NGOs have that liberty or that flexibility. And how do we manage them? How do we get them to do it in a better way? And how do we fund them to do all these things?
So that ability to experiment, and therefore that experimentation is to be able to adapt and leverage things that don't even seem, they're not even on your horizon right now, but this way you sort of start to adapt, and then whatever new comes up, you're able to leverage and integrate into your process on your goals. Otherwise, like you said, if you're ignorant of that, it can just totally steamroll you and make so many things obsolete, and therefore negatively impact the direction that you're taking.
Yeah, and it's very true. Like, it means like Darwin was an incredibly smart person, right? It's like all the species that adapted survived, right? If you
Yes,
don't
correct.
adapt, you're going to die. But for
Correct.
NGOs, I think the equation is slightly different. From a fund, now if I put on my funder hat, right? If
Yes.
we don't give them the funding, if we don't give them the ability, if we don't reduce the barriers for them to experiment, right? Then we cannot look at them and say like, you did not experiment, you deserve to die. Like, we did not set up the conditions for them to experiment with.
Exactly.
So it's like,
That
so
needs to be
again, I mean, so
enabled.
coming
Yeah.
back to the philanthropy side, right, means going back to the conversation
Full
which we
circle.
had like some time ago, is like, from a funding perspective, especially if you've been funding startups, or even if you're putting money in the market, when you're giving money to startups, or when you're giving money to the market, you're not dictating anything, right? You basically hope that the SEC reports, or like, there's no fraud being committed, and there's lots of fraud being committed in the commercial markets, right? But you don't say like what percentage to spend. So you're giving the money and saying like, hey, do good with it. Like, use it where you think it needs a fit, and don't put too many restrictions on it, like what it's called unrestricted funding, etc.,
Right,
right?
right,
But
right.
believe in these people, like people,
Yeah.
Anshu, Vanessa, Suparna, all of these people have spent like years,
Entire
multiple
life.
years, their
Yeah, yeah,
entire
yeah.
lives,
Like,
right?
yeah, yeah.
They know way more about it than I'll ever know, than you'll ever know, right? So trusting people to, oh, that's the other thing that sorry, I keep that the other thing that we, you probably get this question a lot, like, can I trust these NGOs,
Hmm.
right? And
Good
to
thing you're
me,
touching
like,
upon it. Yeah.
in my 20 plus years in the sector, I haven't come across a single NGO where I even thought about that question. In general, it's always been the other way around, right? Where I tell the NGO, please go spend money on yourself. It has become so much like these days, like we always do unrestricted funding,
Hmm.
but one of my statements after we give them the grant is, the only advice I can give you is, if you want to spend this money on salaries or spend it on investing in people, I would strongly encourage you to do so.
Investing. Yeah.
You don't even
Totally.
need to tell me that. All right. Like, we've got to just change that mindset, right? People are our
Absolutely.
biggest capital there. And if we
Totally.
don't realize it and acknowledge it, they aren't going to prosper and thrive.
Totally. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Lobo. This has been a delight. I hope everyone listening and watching has found it as useful as I personally did. And thank you again for not just this time that you spend, but all that you do and all that you're encouraging and inspiring others to do. Thank you so much, Lobo.
No worries. Thank you, Amit. It was really good to have this conversation.
Likewise.